In December of 2025, it was announced that the Sonic movie universe would be getting a spin-off film slated for the end of 2028. No other details were presented, but most fans are pretty sure this will be a Shadow the Hedgehog movie. There's no information on how far along it is or what the plot will be, and since the main marketing focus is the fourth Sonic film, I wanted to use this murky period to give my pitch/prediction for the story. Now, I'm not one of those big shot YouTubers who can pay good money for animatics and outside voice actors, nor can I draw my own storyboards, so you can assume the visuals on this are just going to be some tangentially related gameplay footage. Feel free to make this an audio-only experience and use that imagination of yours, provided it hasn't already been ruined by an endless stream of effortless content. The big picture summary for my version of this movie is a fugitive-style film centering Shadow the Hedgehog. The Sonic movies have thus far shown Gunn to be somewhat inconsistent in its motivations, sometimes at odds with the Sonic characters and other times soliciting their help. Gunn are now more specifically characterized as an antagonistic force, with cooler heads like that of the former Commander Walters being outliers who should not be counted. Under the direction of the now promoted Commander Rockwell, Gunn will pursue Shadow in an attempt to capture him and restart Project Shadow. Let's dive into the important characters, shall we? First and foremost, we have Shadow the Hedgehog, returning from his last movie appearance. Having now saved the world and begun the process of moving on from his past, Shadow is now at a difficult crossroads. The vengeful purpose he stewed in for 50 years is now invalid, but without it, he's unsure of his life's purpose. Unfortunately, it's hard to truly heal from your past and introspect on your identity when you're under constant pursuit by the very people who caused your trauma. Director turned Commander Rockwell is now the leader of Gunn, and the seeds of xenophobia and sinister purpose planted in the third movie are now ready for harvest. Rockwell harbors a deep distrust of Shadow and other aliens. She has plans for Sonic and the like, but currently views Shadow as the biggest threat. The first Sonic character I want to incorporate who will be new to this movie is Omega. E123 Omega, with the E in this case standing for extraterrestrial, is a robot designed by Gunn to be the ultimate weapon for killing alien life forms. Omega is an autonomous killing machine with an advanced artificial intelligence, but plenty of inhibitions have been put in place to ensure he follows Gunn's orders. Changing Omega's origins to be that of a Gunn creation helps to establish Gunn as a powerful foe who are making dangerous plans behind the backs of our furry protagonists. If Omega is number 123 in the production line, what other threats might await Team Sonic in future movies? Final on our list of important characters is Rouge the Bat. Rouge is our main perspective character, and it's her character arc that informs the narrative of this film. Through part of the story, we see Rouge partnered up with Omega, attempting to pursue and capture Shadow by any means necessary. Rouge has been Gunn's secret ace this entire time. The timeline we've been led to believe so far was that Shadow arrived on Earth, and then 50 years later, Sonic arrived and brought Gunn back into prominence. However, many years before Sonic came to Earth, it was actually a young Rouge who appeared lost, unsure of her past, and ready to be intercepted by a Gunn task force. Rather than being studied by scientists, Rouge is raised to be a Gunn soldier, trained from an early age to be a top agent and a secret weapon against other alien threats. Perhaps she even went through training with one Agent Topaz. her earliest known friend. Rouge's love of glittering objects and gemstones was noted early, and she proudly wears a chunky gemstone-laden bracelet that was given to her by her handler when she was little. Was it really just a thoughtful gift, or is there perhaps some insurance policy hidden within? As you can probably tell, this movie is meant to be both a shadow movie and a Team Dark movie. My plan for the story does not involve Dr. Eggman, as I believe it's important to establish other antagonistic threats if the movie series is meant to keep expanding. I also do not have plans to introduce Black Doom for this film specifically. I'm sure he would come eventually, but I think it's important to build up some of Shadow's character and dynamic before shoving a daddy issues shaped wrinkle into his movies. Having him meet and eventually partner up with his closest allies will give him characters to play off of in his own stories and adventures. There is another game character that will come into play later in the story, but that's best saved for the long synopsis. I don't have any voice actors in mind for either Omega or Rouge. I'm not really one for celebrity casting, so who knows? Maybe it'll be Vin Diesel or Jason Momoa voicing Omega, or maybe they'll choose video game or TV actors so as not to have to pay celebrity rates for every single on-screen character when Team Sonic and Team Dark eventually do meet again. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very interested in voicing Rouge if I got the chance, but that's pretty unlikely since I'm what can charitably be described as an amateur voice actress. If I were to plead my case, I would say that my niche voice, that of the transatlantic accent, can lend a certain texture to Rouge's portrayal. Rouge is historically a femme fatale, and the transatlantic accent can be just as much a shorthand for that as it can be for outdated speech. Plus, I think it would be cute characterization if Rouge learned English in part through watching old movies like Casablanca, Charade, and Philadelphia Story. Perhaps she even picked up a love for jewels and treasures through movies like Breakfast at Tiffany's and How to Steal a Million. But if it can't, and likely won't, be me voicing this iconic character, I think Rouge is played best when she's able to hit lower, more sultry registers. And in the games, I believe that's been best demonstrated by Kathleen Delaney. If she isn't reprising her role for this movie, then hopefully someone with a voice like hers can pick up the mantle. Oh, how we've been robbed of an Eartha Kitt rendition of Rouge the Bat, who would have been objectively the best celebrity voice for the character. With the characters and logline out of the way, I want to move into the last portion of the video and give a more in-depth synopsis of the plot. Some plot beats will be interspersed with example lines Rouge might deliver during important moments. Consider this a way to help spice up the summary, as well as maybe a backdoor audition. If not for voice actress, then maybe as a character consultant. Our story begins with Shadow, holed up in the outskirts of a poor shanty town in the middle of nowhere. Ever since we last saw him, Shadow's been struggling to find his place in the world. We see Shadow wrapped in a shroud, weaving in and out of the town, assisting the impoverished inhabitants in mostly unseen ways. When a violent gang rolls in, Shadow is forced into the light to protect the townsfolk he's been helping thus far. With a quick kinetic action scene, Shadow makes short work of the thugs and they turn tail and run. But unfortunately, the commotion, as well as cell phone footage from some of the locals, has drawn the attention of Gunn. Shadow notes the appearance of a surveillance drone and quickly finds a way to disappear once more. Once out of Gunn's watchful eye, Shadow reflects on his fugitive status. That even still, Gunn pursue him and make it hard to find his calling. Meanwhile, at Gunn headquarters, Commander Rockwell receives yet another report for a sighting of Project Shadow. She and some of the higher-ups wonder what to do about this alien threat that continually evades their capture. Rockwell gestures at a soldier and tells them to bring her in. We cut to nighttime outside of a military base. Soldiers patrol the compound. From a low angle looking past the shoulders of one soldier, we see a shadow glide around to the back of the base. The figure perches atop the building just above the rooftop doorway. A lone guard patrols the small rooftop area, searching for intruders outside the compound from his higher vantage point. In a flash, the unknown figure knocks out the guard. The heel of a boot comes down on a padlock to the rooftop door, and quickly the figure rushes inside. Our unknown subject darts from shadow to shadow, evading notice of security cameras and the guards patrolling inside. A gloved hand traces a large placard detailing the building's layout, the index finger tapping once it's found the destination. The figure darts past an unaware soldier through a slowly closing doorway into the stairwell. Our subject jumps down the center of the stairwell, and the camera follows, rapidly descending several floors. Purple wings unfurl, and the figure lands gracefully as she's revealed to be Rouge the Bat. Rouge wears an outfit similar to her Sonic Heroes attire, combat boots and fatigues, but in a dark shade of purple and custom tailored to someone of her species. A conspicuous gold bangle bracelet hangs tightly on her right wrist, adorned with sparkling diamonds. Rouge moves through the lower floor of the compound and punches in a code to her destination room. Behind the door is a data storage room filled with filing cabinets and a large central computer. Rouge flicks a gun thumb drive into the central computer, and it beeps as a progress bar slowly fills up. Rouge's attention turns to a safe in the back wall of the room. She presses a large ear to the safe and attempts to crack the combination. Suddenly, klaxons blare as an alarm sounds. Soldiers rush into the room. With an annoyed grunt, Rouge sticks an explosive to the safe door and jumps into action. An explosion sets off behind her as Rouge dispatches the soldiers, slamming them with powerful kick attacks as she bounces between corners of the room. During the brawl, Rouge flips over to the computer and deftly removes the thumb drive just as it blinks complete. Quickly darting back to the safe, Rouge picks up the file that was stored inside. A soldier attempts to get the jump on her, but her sensitive ears pick up his approach and she dodges the attack, roundhouse kicking him into the safe. As she readies her exit from the compound, Rouge finds one more surprise waiting for her at the entrance of the computer room. A red, wolf-like creature similar to the other furry Sonic aliens. This wolf is designed similarly to the promotional custom character from Sonic Forces, kitted out in combat gear and wielding a large energy weapon. The wolf fires a blast at Rouge. She dodges the shot and lunges at them with a flying kick. The scene slows down. The compound and wolf character pixelate and the details fall away, as it's revealed that the compound is merely an advanced gun simulation room, and the wolf character is simply a training robot. The scene returns to full speed as Rouge's kick lands on the robot's head, fully decapitating it. Rouge lands and dusts herself off. She turns her attention to the gun director. I didn't know I'd have an audience today. What did you think of my beautiful technique? Back at Commander Rockwell's office, Rouge is briefed on Project Shadow. Footage from Shadow's infiltration of the gun base in the third movie plays on monitors in the background as Rockwell explains the mission. Capture the rogue alien and bring it back to gun headquarters to neutralize this dangerous threat to humanity. Rockwell tosses a folder to Rouge containing information on Project Shadow as well as details on all of its recently known locations. Remote surveillance of the alien has helped to give a rough idea of its travel path, but it hasn't stayed in place long enough to mobilize a unit to capture it. Gunn are now reasonably certain of the next location the alien will appear, so the plan is to get there ahead of time for an ambush capture. Rockwell states that Rouge will be given a platoon to command, as well as a special new weapon, gesturing to a doorway at the side of the room. Large footsteps thud and hydraulics screech as a large red robot enters the scene. The camera pans over the shiny steel hull of E-123 Omega, a formidable hulking android looking almost exactly like he was pulled straight from the games. Rouge looks annoyed by all this. Commander, you and I both know that I've pulled off much more complicated missions all on my own, yet suddenly one loose experiment means I need an entire squad of jarheads and a 10-ton babysitter? Commander Rockwell explains how dangerous Project Shadow is, recounting the events of the third movie in which the alien teamed up with Dr. Eggman and nearly destroyed the planet using the Eclipse cannon. Commander Rockwell also lays the blame for Commander Walters and Maria Robotnik's deaths on Project Shadow, something viewers of the previous movies will understand to be a lie. Fine, have it your way. Just don't blame me if all this dead weight slows me down. The scene turns once again to Shadow the Hedgehog, now in a more urban area, but in one that's still clearly impoverished. Shadow clings to alleyways to stay hidden as much as possible. A young schoolgirl crosses the road as the hand on the crosswalk sign flashes and counts down. On the other side of a street, a skateboarder fails a trick and bails onto the grass, but their skateboard continues rolling off the sidewalk and trips the crossing girl. The young girl skins her knee, and the pain keeps her from getting up. The light for crossing traffic turns green, and an oncoming semi-truck is unable to see the child lying prone on the ground. With a flash, Shadow darts into action and scoops the child out of danger and onto the grass. The child looks down at her knee to see a fresh bandage, quickly applied by her rescuer. She looks around as adults rush to her aid, but she is unable to find Shadow. Shadow peers around another alleyway, confirming the girl's safety, and then continuing forward. A few more blocks and he comes upon a run-down public park. Swing seats lie on the rubberized mulch, disconnected from their chains. The slide is dirty and the paint is fading. The monkey bars are rusted and falling apart. Shadow looks around to confirm no one can see, and then makes his way to the utility shed at the far side of the park. From the rooftops, Rouge darts out and lands in front of Shadow. Shadow is taken aback, commenting he's surprised to see another life form like him, remarking that the only others he met had all come from Montana. Oh darling, you're nothing like me. Now, why don't you make this easy for me and put your hands where I can see them? Rouge flicks out a pair of handcuffs, ready to arrest the alien. Shadow sprints away, realizing his would-be captor must be working for Gunn. On swift wings, Rouge weaves through alleyways and between traffic to pursue the fleeing experiment. Shadow attempts to toss crates, trash cans, and other debris, but Rouge's superior air mobility proves this effort fruitless. Military vehicles barrel down the street, cutting off Shadow's path and forcing him to make hard detours. Unfortunately, Shadow is unfamiliar with the area and ends up exactly where the platoon had been leading him to, a dead-end alleyway. Shadow continues darting towards the wall, intending to run up it, but suddenly it bursts open, broken by Omega. Shadow skids to a stop and glances behind him. Rouge is quickly closing the distance between them. Shadow attempts to run up one of these side walls, but Omega quickly aims his guns at the experiment, cutting off Shadow's path with a hail of energy shots. He quickly reroutes and attempts to run back the way he came towards Rouge, intending to fight his way out. Just as his attention is drawn towards the Batwoman, Rouge tosses out a clutch of bombs, and with a brilliant glittering flash, they disorient Shadow. With his vision blurred, Shadow swings wildly in Rouge's direction, but she dodges and knocks him back towards Omega with a heel kick. Shadow slides backwards and attempts to prop himself up, but he's shot in the back by one of Omega's energy blasts. Enraged, Shadow flashes towards Omega and kicks the large robot back, bouncing his way back towards Rouge. Omega slides back a few feet, spinning around wildly, but remains upright. Shadow attempts a flurry of punches and kicks on Rouge, swiftly blocked by her own kicks. Shadow commits too hard to a punch, and Rouge snatches his arm between her calves, spinning and slamming him to the ground. Shadow slams a fist on the asphalt and curls into a ball, lobbing a spin dash at Rouge. Rouge attempts to soften the impact with her wings, but she's still knocked back by the powerful attack. Rouge falls to her back, and Shadow attempts to incapacitate her with a falling punch. Rouge rocks back and drives both heels into Shadow's stomach, kicking him back towards Omega, who intercepts the airborne Hedgehog with a launched hand. Omega's hand flies towards Shadow and wraps its claws around him. The hand clanks to the ground with Shadow in it, and Omega begins reeling him in by the cable protruding from the robot's wrist. Shadow attempts to break free, and Omega shocks him into compliance. Rouge stands over Shadow. Well, that was quite the workout. But the fun's over now. Don't make this any harder on yourself, and come quietly. Between you and me, though, I think the big guy here hopes you won't. During the transport back to Gunn's base, Rouge reflects on her past. In a flashback, we see a vignette of memories. A very young Rouge steps through a warp ring onto a grassy field near a military compound. Lights and alarms blare as the soldiers notice the anomaly. The commotion scares young Rouge and she turns to leave, but the warp ring closes behind her. Rouge sprints away and attempts to flee, but a soldier catches her. The soldier, a young Walters, looks down at the scared Bat-child and smiles at her, telling her it'll be alright. A montage of events flashes by as we see Rouge growing up and going through military-style training. During downtime, Rouge watches old movies with Walters. She takes to mimicking some of Audrey Hepburn's performances, and seems to show a particular liking for the jewelry in Breakfast at Tiffany's. A handler gifts Rouge with her signature bracelet, while Walters watches from the background with a concerned expression. While in training, Rouge finds the other recruits to be icing her out. One young woman finally introduces herself to Rouge as Topaz, and the two are shown completing training together. Rouge smiles proudly as Commander Walters presents her with her official gun agent badge. The scene flashes forward to Rouge, now glaring angrily in front of Shadow's prison cell. Gun soldiers restrain Shadow using special ankle cuffs to completely nullify his powers. Shadow glares at Rouge, questioning if she's really happy with her choices. Rouge retorts that she's keeping the world safe from a freak like him. Shadow remarks that this is clearly how Gunn view her as well, and as soon as she's outlived her use, as soon as there's even a hint of dissent, she'll be in a cage right next to him. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh! Everyone here knows that I'm one of the good ones. I'm here to help humanity. You could have been too, but then you had to go and kill that little girl. Rouge's comment touches a nerve, and Shadow rumbles with anger, his quills standing on end like raised hackles. For a brief moment, there's a small spark of energy in his eyes. He forces his eyes shut and takes a long, deep breath, calming himself down. He remarks that if Gunn have to lie to her like that, then Rouge is much less safe than she believes. Rouge is offended by the insinuation and storms out, leaving Shadow alone in his cell. Rouge stomps through the hall, muttering about the alien freak thinking it's the same as her. As she passes by an intersecting hall, the camera focuses on two agents having a conversation. One mentions that it's good they finally have Project Shadow contained again. The other questions if this is the right decision, as Shadow supposedly helped to save the Earth from the Eclipse Cannon. The first agent responds that that was only according to the blue Hedgehog, and that they shouldn't believe him. After all, the blue one could be just as evil as Project Shadow, maybe trying to save its own skin since they're both aliens. The second agent reluctantly agrees that this is possible. The first agent then remarks that this is why people shouldn't trust any of the aliens, and Gunn should work on eliminating the rest once they're done with Project Shadow. The camera continues its previous path down the hall, revealing Rouge had been just around the corner listening in. A concerned look crosses her face. Rouge returns to the holding area to talk once more to Shadow. As she opens the door, she hears Shadow scream in pain. Rouge keeps the door cracked open slightly, and hides behind it to investigate. Through the crack, we can see gun scientists prodding Shadow with needles and extracting some of his blood. Rouge quickly backs away from the door and hides. A few moments later, the scientists emerge from the prison. Rouge trails behind the scientists, making sure not to be seen. She follows them to a laboratory and sneaks up to a shadowy corner of the ceiling. We see the scientists put vials of Shadow's blood into a centrifuge in order to extract some kind of glowing liquid. The liquid is removed and distilled before being drained into a new vial. One scientist inserts a syringe into the glowing liquid and extracts some of it. He takes the syringe over to a glass tank and with his free hand picks up an orange and black salamander. The scientist injects the liquid into the salamander. For a brief moment, the salamander glows, but the effect subsides. Rouge notices a file labeled Project Umbra on an unattended lab bench and swipes it before absconding. Rouge flips through the pages as she walks down the hall. Omega's stomping footsteps cross her path and she pulls him aside. Rouge asks Omega to pull up information on Project Shadow. Omega attempts to process the request, but remarks that he does not have the clearance to access such files. Rouge finds this strange, since they were both assigned to capture Project Shadow. Rouge asks Omega to pull up information on Project Umbra. Omega once again remarks that he does not have clearance to access such files. Rouge's eyes look to the bottom corner of her face, and her lips purse as she ponders this. She thanks Omega and rushes off to find someone. In the barracks on base, Agent Topaz converses with a few of her colleagues. One agent remarks that they'll all be going to the mess hall, and Topaz replies that she'll catch up with them. Topaz sits on her bunk and pretends to tie her shoe. Seemingly to no one, Topaz remarks, "I know you're there." Rouge emerges from hiding in the top bunk, stating that she needs to talk to Topaz and clear things up. Topaz replies that it will be just like old times, but she really does need to grab something to eat. In the on-base Olive Garden, Topaz eats a chicken Alfredo as Rouge recounts what she's seen Gunn do to Shadow, her inability to access any files on Shadow, and how some agents talked about how Shadow may have helped save the world. Topaz discusses how Sonic helped save the world from Eggman's giant robot, and then again from the Eclipse Cannon. She remarks how none of them would be here today if it weren't for Sonic and his two friends, and if Sonic says Shadow helped to save the Earth, maybe there's some truth to that. Rouge expresses difficulty believing this. Topaz recounts the numerous ways Rouge has helped with gun missions and operations, and then states plainly that Rouge only had the opportunity to do those things because someone at Gun took a chance on her and put their trust into her. She bluntly states that she and Rouge probably wouldn't have met if this hadn't happened, that Rouge would likely have been an experiment just like Shadow, or worse. Rouge thanks Topaz for the talk and leaves the mess hall with a determined look. Rouge tracks down and intercepts Omega once more, asking him to follow her to the computer room. Once in the computer room, Rouge plugs Omega into a large computer and begins typing away at the keyboard. Omega inquires about Rouge's actions, and she explains that she's removing Gunn's inhibitor software to allow him unrestricted access to their files. Omega begins to warn her that this is against Gun protocol, but then quickly cuts himself off, announcing Gunn's inhibition protocol has been deactivated. Once done, she asks Omega to pull up information on Sonic the Hedgehog. Scenes from the previous movies play on the monitor as Omega summarizes the ways in which Sonic and friends saved the Earth. Rouge then asks Omega to pull up information on Project Shadow, and Omega begins recounting Shadow's origins as told in the third movie. Rouge interrupts, stating that she knows this already. She then asks him to pull up information on Maria Robotnik. Omega summarizes Maria as the granddaughter of Gerald Robotnik, known associate to Project Shadow, status deceased. On the monitor, it plays footage from the third movie showing Maria's death. Rouge watches in horror, but shuts her eyes and shakes her head to clear her mind and power through. Rouge asks Omega to pull up footage from Gunn's recent surveillance of Shadow, specifying she wants the information they used to track him down before they captured him. The monitor displays a rapid barrage of clips from Shadow's travels, including cell phone footage of Shadow defeating the gang members and CCTV footage of Shadow rescuing the little girl from the truck. Rouge attempts to ask about Commander Walters, but just as she is finishing this request, Commander Rockwell bursts into the room. Rockwell is outraged at Rouge for hacking into Omega and digging through classified files. Rouge matches Rockwell's anger, tossing the Project Umbra file at her and demanding answers. "You're keeping him prisoner, torturing him, and extracting his DNA, all so you can create super soldiers. You're repeating the exact same experiment that led to poor Maria Robotnik's death. And for what?" Rockwell states that Gunn need to develop these weapons to fend off extraterrestrial threats. Rouge demands to know what threats Gunn expects to face. She argues that Sonic and friends have saved the world multiple times, that Shadow has helped protect people, and that she's been nothing but loyal to humanity the entire time she's lived here. Rockwell looks down coldly and her face hardens, claiming Rouge has been compromised. Rouge suddenly realizes her situation and readies herself for a fight. She states that she will be leaving now. Commander Rockwell states that the only way Rouge will leave is in handcuffs. Rouge jumps forward for a flying kick, but suddenly the bracelet on her wrist shocks her and she crumples to the floor. Rockwell towers over Rouge, remote control in her hand. Rockwell reveals that Rouge's bracelet was Gunn's insurance policy in case she ever went rogue. Rouge attempts to get up, but Rockwell shocks her again, harder this time. Rockwell states that the bracelet can increase in power as much as she needs until it kills Rouge. She states that Rouge better not make things harder on herself, and just come quietly. But just between the two of them, she hopes Rouge won't. Rockwell shocks Rouge once more to underline her point. In the prison area, Rouge is thrown into a cell right next to Shadow's. The soldiers leave and lock the door behind them. Shadow remarks that he'd like to tell her that he hates to say "I told you so," but it would be a lie if he did. Rouge sinks down on her bench, ears drooping. A few moments later, Topaz enters the room and a guard escorts her to Rouge's cell. The guard stands watch as Topaz sobs at Rouge. She cries and wails, asking Rouge why she'd betray everyone. Topaz clutches Rouge's hands, choking back tears, and asks how Rouge could betray their friendship. This statement proves too much for Topaz, and she covers her eyes with one arm, storming out of the holding area. The guard locks Rouge's cell back up. Rouge stares into space, feeling betrayed and alone. Tears begin to well up in her eyes. Shadow, I'm sorry for what I said earlier. About Maria, about all of it. I could say that I didn't know. I could say I was just following orders. But that doesn't excuse anything. The truth is, I just took their side to save my own skin. And I never gave you a chance. And now we both get to be government experiments for the rest of our lives. In the other cell, Shadow ponders Rouge's words. Rouge puts her head in her hands and begins to sob. Rouge's crying abruptly stops, and she realizes her bracelet is missing. That sneak! I taught her that trick. Rouge's eyes dart back and forth. She begins to smirk as a plan formulates in her mind. Shadow, we're getting out of here. I don't expect you'll ever forgive me, but right now we've got a better shot at making it out alive if we both work together. When this is all done, we can go our separate ways. We never have to cross paths again. Shadow remarks that it's a nice sentiment, but clearly there's no way to escape. You just leave that to me. God made me turn in my standard issue equipment, but I never did mention my private collection. A woman must have some secrets after all. Rouge plants a heart-shaped device on her cell door. The device begins to tick and it sparks, shorting out the lock on the door. Rouge gingerly swings open her cage and approaches Shadow's cell. She punches in a code to unlock Shadow. Rouge raises a leg and then rockets her heel downward in a powerful axe kick, shattering Shadow's leg restraints. An alarm begins blaring. Shadow bursts through the prison door into the hall. The alarm is louder now. Rouge and Shadow peer down the hall towards the intersecting hallway, noting gun soldiers running away from the cell. Shadow questions what the soldiers are running towards if it's not to stop their prison break. Back in the lab, The once small salamander has grown large, almost filling the room. Its once pale, slimy skin is now neon orange and rough. The rapidly mutating biolizard roars and swats away gun soldiers as they attempt to tranquilize it. Behind the occupied soldiers, Rouge instructs Shadow to help evacuate the facility, stating she'll return to assist once she can grab something. Rouge flies down the hall, quickly looking from door to door, but Commander Rockwell turns the corner and stops her in her tracks. Rockwell attempts to shock Rouge into submission again, but to her surprise sees Rouge does not have the bracelet. Rockwell draws her gun to point it at Rouge, but in that time Rouge closes the gap between them and roundhouse kicks the weapon away. Rockwell puts up her fists, ready for a fight. Rouge flies at the commander, dealing a flurry of kicks, but Rockwell blocks them with her arms. Suddenly, Rockwell stops the kick by grabbing Rouge's shin with both hands and slamming her into a wall. Rouge bounces off and crumples to the floor, holding her ribs. Commander Rockwell attempts to kick Rouge while she's down, but Rouge leaps away and rockets from wall to wall, returning with a flying kick. Rockwell grabs Rouge's approaching heel and whirls around to throw Rouge behind her. Rouge quickly unfurls her wings to redirect her flight path, making a U-turn and driving her heel into Rockwell's face. Commander Rockwell spins and sputters, falling to the ground, knocked out cold. Rouge continues to barrel through the hall, eventually finding Omega in the computer room where she left him. Omega remarks that he has been sitting there for several hours as everyone left him alone. He asks if Rouge would like to continue her file search. Rouge states that there's no time and requests Omega follow her. Rouge and Omega return to the lab as Shadow escorts a gun soldier through the hall. The biolizard has grown larger now, and the ceiling is cracking. Rouge instructs Omega to attack the biolizard. Omega fires energy blasts to stun the experiment, but the shots only further agitate the monster. Omega states that he's switching to lethal force, but just as he's about to fire, the building begins to rumble. An exterior shot shows the biolizard's head break through the roof of the compound. The monster roars and shrieks as it continues to grow. As it grows, so too does a red mass on its back. Outside the compound, Rouge, Shadow, and Omega escort the final occupants to safety. The building buckles and crumbles under the weight of the monster. Rouge, Shadow, and Omega team up to fight the biolizard. From the ground, Omega fires a hail of bullets at the biolizard's head. The bullets ricochet harmlessly off the creature's chin. Shadow quickly circles the biolizard, throwing spin dash after spin dash at the monster, but his attacks only bounce off of its tough skin. The biolizard shrieks and wails. It begins firing energy spheres from its mouth at surrounding military vehicles. From the air, Rouge attempts to pelt the monster with her heart bombs, but none seem to affect its tough skin. One stray bomb lands on the lump on the biolizard's back, and the explosion briefly causes it to shriek in pain. Rouge flies back down to meet Shadow and Omega, explaining that their attacks are not working. She mentions the mass on its back might be a weak point, and if they can hit it hard enough, the monster might become vulnerable to a concentrated attack. The three of them look at the chaos ensuing underneath the monster, and Shadow remarks that they don't have much time. Rouge flies up into position, and Omega grabs onto Shadow. Shadow curls into a ball, recessing into Omega's wrist. Omega aims Shadow at a now in-place Rouge, and fires his arm cannon. Shadow rockets forward and uncurls, reaching out his hands. Rouge meets his outstretched hands with hers, grabbing his wrists and spinning quickly to redirect him back down. Shadow once again curls up and begins rolling. Shadow's spin attack meteors down into the biolizard's back. and it screams in pain. Omega rockets up to meet the monster's pained gaze and unloads a barrage of missiles into its open maw. The rockets fly down the bio-lizard's throat and explode inside. The creature gurgles and screams in pain, then collapses to the ground. The bio-lizard is defeated. Rouge, Shadow, and Omega meet back on the ground. Rouge excitedly congratulates them. Shadow grunts an acknowledgement. Omega states matter-of-factly that his superior firepower defeated the monster. A now conscious Commander Rockwell interrupts the celebration, stating that they're all still gun prisoners. Rockwell instructs Omega to apprehend the aliens. Rouge and Shadow look to Omega. Omega stands there silently. After a brief pause, Omega responds flatly with a no. Furious, Rockwell demands Omega follow her orders. Omega states that he does not want to. Shadow remarks that Gun have no ability to take them in, and they should instead tend to their wounded. Rockwell draws a gun to point at Rouge, but Omega fires a laser to destroy the weapon. The trio turn their back on a humiliated Rockwell. As the trio leave the compound, Rouge states to Shadow that she intends to keep her promise, and they can go their separate ways now. Shadow remarks that Rouge seems to have lost her purpose now that she's no longer with Gun. He relates to this lack of purpose and states that they might be better able to find their calling if they work together. Rouge expresses disbelief, but Shadow responds that if he got a second chance, he should give her one as well. Well, if you wanted to take me on a globe-trotting adventure, all you had to do was ask. Maybe on the way we can find a new bracelet to replace the one I lost. Hopefully something with emeralds this time. Omega states that he will go where both of them go. Alright then, darlings. This makes us a team. And that is my prediction / story pitch for the Sonic spin-off movie. What do you think? Is this the ideal Team Dark film? Or would you have taken things in a different direction? And how about my voice acting? Is my portrayal ready for the big screen? Or would you perhaps prefer someone a little less rough around the edges like Zendaya or Jennifer Lawrence? Please, direct any and all complaints to my Ko-Fi page where, for just $5 a month, you can get your name in the credits of my videos and help me pay for voice acting lessons. If you were paying attention, you undoubtedly noticed that the long synopsis was very Rouge-centric. While there's certainly some connective tissue and extra scenes missing that would exist in a full script, the Rouge focus is very much intentional. A character works best when they have someone to play off of, and Shadow is no different. Rouge is generally the best character to pair up alongside Shadow because she is the emotional core of Team Dark. In Sonic 06, she declares that she'll always be on his side even if the world turns against him, and in most cutscenes and spin-off media, she's the one who has the best emotional insight into Shadow. Before introducing a big villain like Black Doom, Shadow needs his own established traveling companion so we can actually get some insight into how it affects him. I said all the way back in my third Sonic movie review that having Rouge as one of Gun's secret weapons would have made perfect sense, as you'd imagine the Project Shadow debacle and their inability to contain Sonic and friends might have them scrambling to find a similar alien to get under their control. This concept is meant to preserve a lot of Rouge's character traits, namely her secret agent skills, confidence, charm, love of jewels, and empathy, while changing other aspects to help her fit into the established movie universe. If she's been raised and monitored by Gunn, then she probably doesn't have much room for treasure hunts and jewel heists, at least not in her first appearance. By the end of the film, she's better able to understand Shadow's point of view because she also gets betrayed by Gunn. But instead of Gunn stepping in after the government got scared, Rouge comes to find that Gunn were always pointed at her back from the very beginning. Obviously, I'd have people calling Rouge a Mary Sue if she were to single-handedly take Shadow down for Gunn, and so Omega had to be added for the two of them to tag team Shadow. Even then, they only won because they had him cornered in a narrow alley, and he might have been a little off his game, still recovering from the Eclipse Cannon incident. Omega's addition also just rounds out Team Dark without having to wait for an entire other movie. His decision to travel with Shadow and Rouge at the very end may seem a bit sudden, but it was even more sudden in Sonic Heroes. Considering Rouge took the time to hack into his programming and they all take down a powerful enemy together at the end, I hope my synopsis provided a better reason for him to join the team besides getting angry that he was locked in a room. But with all of that said, this is where my video must end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll return for the next video. And Mr. Fowler? If you enjoyed my little fanfiction reading, I'm sure you know how to find my business email. My name is Rouge the Bat, and all the world's gems are mine to keep.